Hi folks, welcome back to the Tabletop's Edge as we continue the action here on the 17th of December in our last Blitzkrieg campaign playthrough. So far this turn, we've seen the 116th Panzer Division explode out of its bridgehead at Burg Reuland to seize Saint-Vit from the southwest, while further south, the 2nd Panzer Division moved westwards from Dassburg, swept through Clairvaux, and roughly handled CCR of the 9th Armored Division. But it hasn't been all one-sided so far, as 7th Armored was able to concentrate most of the division against the 2 Panzer battalions of the 116th that had pressed westwards and inflicted heavy tank losses on them in a rather large tank battle. We're going to pick up the action now, just after the U.S. 99th Infantry Division's activation. It's going back over to the Germans, and I believe we're going to see Kampfgruppe Peiper start to get into the action for the first time this game. Now, Peiper is located way back here on the east edge of the map. They set up used on the 16th, and he failed to get a second activation on the first turn, so he is yet to move. And what we're going to do is we'd like him to try and get westward here. However, 12th Volksgrenadier is having a heck of a time clearing this road out to the west. So the choice is to either have Peiper just come up here and bulldoze his way through the formation here, which would certainly coordinate both of them, possibly end up mixing them if he can't get all the way clear of them, or he has to go around them. And I think what we're going to do is send him around 12th Volksgrenadier here. We're going to take a little detour to the south and around. The first thing we're going to do, though, is to place the anti-aircraft, anti-tank battalion here into support for the formation. You can see they had no support otherwise. What this will do, Peiper is mostly armored units. You can see tank battalions here, lots of AV. He does have a Pioneer battalion and 2 Panzer Grenadier Kampfgruppen, which the Luftwaffe flak unit will now be able to provide red support to them, which will make their attacks a little bit more effective. Their trains are on the map right here and the entry zone, or entry hex. Anytime the trains are located in the entry hex, if you're less than 5, it still counts as optimal distance. So with the trains on the map and the MSR complete, we are not going into a prepared defense for Peiper. So next up is the snafu roll. For the snafu modifiers, Peiper is fresh, so that's going to be a +1. They're not coordinated, they're not fatigued, they are not mixed. They will get a +1 for game specific, bringing it up to a +2. And they have optimal distance for +3, no ghost trains, no crossing the streams, and no traffic ability. So a +3 to the snafu roll for Peiper. And we get an 8, +3 becomes 11. That's going to be a full result. Now you can see Peiper has no artillery assets attached, and he only has a single point of artillery organic to the formation. So that's going to give him a grand total of 1 artillery point to use in his activation. Now he is a very mobile formation, everybody having 12 and 16 movement points. I think they're almost all tac. Yep, I believe these are all tactical movement. Yep, so no trucks to worry about. And with that in mind, we are going to push them as far west as we can. We're going to take both objective markers and we're going to place them way out here, relatively way out here to the west, right here on top of this 14th Cavalry Group. It's the 32nd Armored Cavalry Squadron. And what we're going to do is have Peiper come down. They're going to go right through, pass through 1st SS, which is no problem because they are buddies. And then in between the gap here between the 12th Volksgrenadier and 3rd Fallschirmjäger on that side of the river. And I think we're going to lead off with the Panzer Battalion. He's going to come down the road here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, where he has to stop. And we'll zoom in a little bit closer on the action here. Now, when the Panzers get adjacent to the 14th Cavalry Group headquarters, they're going to need to stop because they've entered an AV zone of control from the light tank companies here. And they are going to have to do at least one stopping engagement. Now you can see the Panzers have an AV of 4. Their action rating is a 5. It's a little hard to see with the black on black. So that's a total of 9. The Americans have a 1 AV plus 4 action rating for a total of 5. It's going to be a plus 4 on the engagement table. And they have no problem brushing aside the light tanks of the Americans. That's 14. That's a target loss and retreat. The American only has a single step, so that will eliminate this unit of the 14th Cavalry Group. And the Panzers will roll into the hex and through it, which will force the 14th Cavalry headquarters to displace. Now, having jumped the HQ, the only other unit that the 14th Cavalry actually has on map is down here underneath our objective markers. Their trains are just off the screen here to the west, a hex or two. There's not really any good place to put these guys. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What we might do is we're gonna place them all the way out here, I think, by the trains. And we're going to mark those coordinated. Let me go ahead and take care of that, and we'll pick back up in just a moment. All right, having jumped the HQ, I've marked it coordinated. I have flipped the trains to their ghost side, and if there had been any prepared defense for the 14th Cavalry Group, I would have removed that. However, they were not in a prepared defense. The Panzers here have spent 10 of their 16 movement points and their first fire event, so they're going to continue moving. That'll be 11 and a half, where they will need to stop again and engage the 32nd Armored Cav Battalion. This is going to be 4 plus 5 again, but they'll get an additional +1 for being in a double objective zone, which gives the Germans a 10 to a 1 plus 4 for the Americans. So it's going to be a +5 this time instead of a +4. And predictably, even with a poor roll of a 5, that's going to be a 10, which is target loss and retreat. So the 32nd is going to retreat 3 hexes. They would flip to their move side. However, they have no move side in this instance. So they will go 3 hexes back towards their HQ, preferably. Now, the problem is getting to their HQ. They're actually going to go back, I think. The HQ is over here. It's not quite, I don't think it's locally away from the enemy if we retreat them this way directly towards the HQ. Plus, I don't know that I want to get them out here in this bad terrain, which is stop terrain for tack movers like they are. So we'll go to the west. We'll go a little bit to the southwest, 1, 2, 3. That's going to put them on the road here. They are technically outside of the command radius of their headquarters unit right now, but they should be able to hopefully drive west and then come back up to get back in once the 14th activates. Now, with the second fire event being used by the Panzers, they are now stopped for the turn, and we will pick up now with the next units in the division. We'll see what we want to do here. There's the Engineer Battalion here in Schönberg is within the objective zone, so we could move somebody up to perhaps assault them, but I don't know if we want to have Peiper push down this way or instead have him come west. So the idea is to kind of come down and around here and maybe get back out and head out this way towards maybe Malmedy or Stavlo. Get in a position where they can support the 116th over here, which is encountering some difficulties with 7th Armored Division. So with that being said, that may be the only attacks for the formation. What I think we'll do next is I'm going to move up the slowest units because I need to keep everybody within command radius. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, which is going to be the Tiger units. I also have to roll for the Tigers to see if they suffer any losses from mechanical breakdowns every time they move, and a 4 means they are okay. It's a 1 on a D6 will inflict a step loss on them. Now I think I will move the headquarters unit so we know where we can send the faster units. 1, 10, 11, 12. He's 12 and a half to here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 12 and a half, that's 13 and a half, 14 and a half. And let's see, does that help us out? 1, 2, 3, 4. What I'm debating about is whether I want to leave Peiper actually here on the secondary road versus advancing him onto the tracks. If I move him out here on the tracks, the combat trains have to use secondary and primary roads only. So I'll be tracing across tracks here, which will inflict a -1 snafu DRM on the next snafu roll, or I can avoid that by simply just leaving him back here a couple hexes, but then that's going to limit the advance of some of our other units. Let's see, we're here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We could actually jump the 14th Cav HQ yet again. That will put us on that road. I don't even know if I have anybody who can reach that far. Let's see. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 11. Yep, we're not even going to be able to get that far west here. So I'm going to leave Peiper here on the road. That way we can avoid at least one negative snafu modifier. And now it's going to be moving up the rest of the formation. And I don't want to bore you all just watching me count to 16 over and over again. So I'm going to cut it here, and I'll pick it back up once I've finished moving Peiper forward. I've finished Peiper's movement for the turn. As you can see, the formation is working its way westward along the tracks here. The idea is to get out to this main highway here, which will lead them back up to the northern route here and then westward, or we can proceed more to the northwest and out towards Malmedy here. There was, I'll take the objective markers off, clean up everything else. We didn't use our artillery point. Now we need to roll for fatigue. They only did a couple of engagements, so a 1 or a 2 will increase fatigue, and a 3 means they maintain their fresh status, which is important for this next roll, because you can see here on Peiper that he only needs a 3 or better to get a second activation. He's going to get a +1 to that due to the fresh status, so a 2 or better will give him a second activation. And he didn't need it with the 6, so a second activation for Peiper. Now's their opportunity to really drive west and see what kind of difficulties they can create for the Americans. The snafu roll is going to be +1 for fresh. It is going to be +1 for game specific. The trains were moved up to remain in optimal distance, which will give them a +3. However, they are ghosted because of the move, so that drops it to a +2. They're not crossing any streams, and they are not using any tracks. So a +2 for the snafu roll here on the second activation. And a 10 + 2 becomes a 12. That's going to be a full activation. I'll go ahead and take a moment to see where we want to send Peiper, and we will continue with the second activation. Now Peiper, with a full activation, he will get his 1 artillery point, just like last activation, and 2 objective markers. there is really nothing in front of Peiper right now. Absolutely nothing. This is the HQ unit of the 14th Cavalry Group and their trains, and you can see nothing. We've got trains here, we've got a couple of HQs here. All the combat units are further south down towards Saint-Vit, and I think we are going to take a stab at taking Malmedy with Peiper here on this second activation. So we're going to place both of our objective markers on Malmedy. And with that done, let's see, with that done, the slowest unit is going to be sort of the anchor on our push westwards. That's going to be the 501st battalion here with the Tigers. So I will move them first. Peiper only has a 5 command radius, which is why I'm a little more concerned about this than I have been with other Panzer divisions, because their command radius is a 12 as opposed to just the 5. So Peiper has a very powerful force, but it's not very big, and he's got to keep it fairly compact. So with that, we're going to move these Tigers 1.5, 2.5, 3.5, 4.5, 5.5, 6.5, 7.5, 8.5, 9.5, 10, and then 10.5 here to jump the HQ. And what I think we're going to do with the 14th Cav, their only other unit is down here, basically in what is quickly becoming a pocket east of Saint-Vit. So rather than have the headquarters try to jump out here to safety, somewhere relative safety, there's really nowhere for it to go that isn't going to put it way too far away from its only remaining combat unit. So we're going to have the HQ actually displace, retreat into the pocket, as it were, which is a new rule change here for version 2.0. So the headquarters is now moved up to relative safety with the cavalry squadron, and this will be 11 where they jump the trains. Now the trains do not have that option. They must go back up the MSR 10 hexes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then the Tigers will spend their last movement point to get to that location. Now with the Tigers in place, I need to make sure that I can get Peiper, to get Malmedy within the command radius for Peiper. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So anywhere from here westwards, I'm going to go ahead, and since there are no other American combat units in here, I can go ahead and move this headquarters up here next without any worries. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 and a half, 13 and a half. Let's go 14 and 1, 2, 3, 4. That'll work there. 3, 4, 5. He's still there, so that's good. They were stopped from last activation. Now for the combat units. And in Malmedy right now, we have 2 American units. There's the 291st Engineer Battalion with 3 steps. It is a 3 action rating. And we have the independent 99th Norwegian Motorized Infantry Battalion. Since both of them are independents, neither of them are in a prepared defense, nor do they have any support. So now, what I'm looking at is where I'm not going to need the Peiper's Panzers to drop the support of the defenders because they have none. So I'm trying to see where I can place them. And this is really looking at the road network to make things as awkward and difficult for the Americans as I can. What I think I may do with Peiper moving into this area here, also it's going to allow the 116th Panzer to kind of pull back their recon guys and shift them further to the southwest where 7th Armored Division is making a big push. We still want to keep the 106th and CCB of the 9th cut off as long as we can. So let's see, we're going to end up having probably having one of our Panzer Grenadier battalions make the assault here on Malmedy. So let's see. Let's go ahead and let me take a look at this. And rather than again having you guys sit here and watch me hem and haw for 5 or 10 minutes. I'll go ahead and pick it up once we've got a plan of action in place. All right, as you can see, I've moved some of Peiper's formation here. Basically just the units that weren't going to be involved in any combat or attacks. Now, one thing to note is we've got to keep in mind the MSR, and the optimal distance from Peiper back to his combat trains is between 5 and 15 hexes. If the trains are not within optimal distance, they will have to remain on their ghost side, which will give us a -1 to the snafu, in addition to taking away the +1 for not being in optimal distance. So it's really kind of a net -2 if you can't keep your trains at optimal distance on their normal side. So with that in mind, trying to find a complete road for the trains back to a supply source is kind of difficult, particularly with the Americans having not or rather have the 12th Volksgrenadier having not been able to open up this northern route. So we've moved the trains again, which means they're going to remain ghosted here to Holzheim. And Peiper is tracing back. It's right at 15 hexes, and it's coincidentally right along this Rollbahn D red line for the most part, till you get to Hansfeld, and then it turns south to get to the trains. But I thought that was just kind of an interesting little historical coincidence there, or maybe not. This is just such a well-designed game. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 hexes back to the train. So Peiper is here, and I've moved the Pioneer Battalion up to his hex as well. We've got the 2 Panzer battalions deployed forward here. There's no enemy armor for them to really engage with. Now, when the armor moved up, they came across the tracks here. I've avoided jumping the 14th Cavalry Group's trains. I don't want them to displace at this moment. You can see they are now actually cut off, so they're not an illegal hex, and that's going to have some implications when 14th Cavalry Group tries to activate. Same thing with CCB of the 9th Armored now having come along and occupied the Bonnier Crossroads, site of the Malmedy Massacre. We have cut the MSR for CCB of the 9th Armored now, and that is going to have an impact when they go to activate later this turn as well. We've moved one of the Panzer Grenadier battalions up here to the north. You can see they're not quite up to where the 2nd and 99th Infantry Division's combat trains are, but it's down this road that 1st Infantry Division will be coming shortly. So these guys are here to basically kind of guard the northern flank a little bit. And now for the interesting part of the activation, we're going to move up the other Panzer Grenadier Battalion, as well as Spitz's Aufklärungscompany. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 and a half. And we're going to have them make an attack on Malmedy here. Prior to that, Spitze is going to go ahead and use a fire event. Malmedy is excellent terrain. It's red city terrain, so only a 6 is going to inflict a hit on the attack by fire. However, I do get to roll once for each of the 2 American units that are in the hex. So the red die will be the Norwegian, and the white will be the engineer. And it doesn't really matter as they both, as it misses on both of them. So let me go ahead and I'm going to cut the shot here and give you a little better look at the combat close up. All right, we're now going to resolve the actual attack. And you know what? Actually, since Spitze is going to merely assist, he has a second fire event. I'm going to go ahead and expend that second fire event to attack these guys again. And again, the red die will be the Norwegian die, and the white die will be the engineers. And it is a 5 and 3, so again, 2 more misses. So now we're on to the actual attack, which will be conducted by the Panzer Grenadier Battalion, assisted by Spitze. The Panzer Grenadiers have an action rating of 5. They do have red support, as you can see here on the formation card. That's going to be +1 to 6. Double objective zone is 7. I'm going to spend the 1 artillery point that we have as a suppression barrage, which will be 8, 9, and then they have an assist from Spitze for a total of 10. The defenders, we're going to use the action rating of the engineer battalion, which is a 3. They have no support. Neither of them are dual. They are not in prepared defense. However, there are exactly 2 combat units in the hex, so that's going to give them a +1 to 4. And then they are infantry in a city hex, which will be 5, 6. So we have a 10 minus 6 is a +4. Now, because this is a red city hex, it is what is known as defensible terrain or key terrain, which means that the defender in a situational result can ignore the retreat requirement and instead take a step loss to stay in that hex. So the Germans with a +4 modifier are going to need to roll a 7 or better in order to get a mandatory retreat. So we're looking at a little better than a 50-50 shot to succeed here. And they actually just get what they need. 7 plus 4 becomes an 11. That's going to be a D1 and a mandatory retreat. The Americans will suffer 1 step loss on the 291st Engineer Battalion, and then the Norwegian Battalion will retreat. They are already on their move side. You can see their deployed side. They've got the leg movement and the motorized. They're going to retreat back to the west here, 3 hexes on their move side. The engineers have to retreat. Now, since they have no movement, we talked about this, I think, previously when we attacked Clairvaux. The unit then is destroyed if forced to retreat. And now the Panzer Grenadiers can enter Malmedy. So a successful attack for Peiper. You can see also that they're pushing further to the west here. I'll try and pull out a little bit further here. You can kind of get an idea of where the front line basically was or is. They're now out to the west here, north and slightly northwest of Saint-Vite, which is right here. And you can see 116th Panzer is in this area with most of 7th Armored Division concentrated to the south, hitting 116th. There is nothing, and I mean nothing, except the 99th Norwegians, a couple of engineer detachments, and a Fusilier battalion, a Belgian Fusilier battalion up here. There's really nothing out to the west of Peiper here. So it's reasonable, I think, to say that Peiper has kind of broken through at this point. If not, there is just the barest thin line of Americans between him and the Meuse. However, the Americans do have 1st Infantry Division arriving here along with 9th Infantry Division a little further to the east. They are going to be trying to move down here and shut down this road and maybe try and come in behind Peiper and interrupt his supply, which will also effectively keep him from exploiting further to the west. Let's roll for the fatigue for Peiper. They did make an actual attack this time, so that means a 3 or less, and they will lose their fresh status. And they do with the 2, so he is down to fatigue level 0. But you can see just how far mobile units are capable of moving in BCS. Peiper started the turn basically right back here, and he drove down here, came through some bad rough terrain out to the west and moved all the way out to here. So from here to here in a single turn with 2 full activations, that can give you a pretty good idea of just what mobile formations are capable of in BCS. So with that, it's going to switch back to the Americans now to see how they're going to respond to yet another German armored formation breaking into their rear. All right, for the Americans, we've got a couple of arriving reinforcing infantry divisions up north that are pretty good formations that I'd like to get into the fight. So I'm tempted to maybe try and activate 1st Infantry Division and get them maybe to hopefully press through Vonderheit's troopers up there and get down and get engaged with Peiper here before the situation gets any worse up north. We also have 2nd ID over here. And as we work our way further south, you can see we now have 3 formations basically pocketed in the Saint-Vite area, 2 of which can still activate, but the snafu modifiers that they are going to have to deal with on their activation rules are so bad that they're likely to get an outright failure. And I don't want to pass up this opportunity for the US to be able to do something in between the German activations at this point. So I'm going to hold off on activating either the 14th Cav or CCB of the 9th. You can see in the central sector here, 112th and 7th AD are done for the turn, which leaves us with CCR of the 9th as well as 1/10 of the 28th here. They're both coordinated. They've been banged up a little bit, but I still think they've got a decent chance of getting at least a partial activation. And that may allow 1/10 to sort of kind of sort itself out a little bit and put itself into a slightly less vulnerable situation here for the upcoming turn, because the Germans, while 2nd Panzer Division is done, they still have 560th here. They also have the 26th Volksgrenadier, as well as another Panzer Division in Panzer Lehr that have yet to activate this turn. As we go further south, 109th Regiment, I'm okay with the position they're in right now. These guys are dug in. There's no real compelling reason to do anything with them right now. And then further south, you can see CCA of the 9th is done for the turn. 4th Infantry Division is another potential candidate for activation now, because they did receive some reinforcements, and I do have a little bit of a plan of what I'd like to do with them down here, but I don't think that's quite as pressing as the situation further to the west here, west of Clairvaux, between Clairvaux and Bastogne. So with that said, I think we're going to hold off on 1st Infantry Division a little bit longer, and we're going to go ahead and activate the 110th Infantry Regiment. For the 110th Infantry Regiment, you can see here their trains are on the map. They're actually at optimal distance, and we do have a complete MSR. So the next decision we have to make is whether or not we're going to reestablish the prepared defense that was lost when the headquarters was jumped in Clairvaux. And I think we are going to not go back into the prepared defense, because if we enter prepared defense, the headquarters is going to be bolted to the ground in this hex. And right now, the regiment is in really no position to try to hold in place. You can see how widely scattered it is. We've got one company of the 3rd Battalion down here. We've got another one here, and then the 2nd Battalion here. Those are the only 3 combat units from this formation that are left on the map. They will be getting the Engineer Battalion that was garrisoning Clairvaux back next turn. It suffered the retreat, and it was within 3 hexes of the headquarters, so it came off. It'll show up again at the headquarters next turn. Now, the odds of getting a full activation are probably not very good, but I think it's worth taking the chance, because if we can get a full activation, we can hopefully get these 2 companies back into command radius and prevent any isolation losses. It only has a command radius of 6 hexes, so I think we're going to forego the prepared defense and take our chances with getting a full activation. So the snafu modifiers are going to be a fatigue level of 0. They are coordinated, which is -1. They're not mixed, but they do have the -2 game specific, so that's going to make it a -3. The trains are at optimal distance, which brings it back to -2. However, they are ghosted. So a -3, and that will, when we make the die roll here, the coordination marker will disappear. We're done with that. Let's see what we get here for the snafu. And the gamble kind of paid off, as the 10 -3 becomes a 7. That's exactly what they needed to get that full activation result. So the next question is, are we going to place either of the 2 objective markers? And I don't think so. I think right now the problem with placing an objective marker, say, over here and having this company spot for an artillery barrage would be that the company then would be finished, meaning it could no longer move. And right now, our main concern is for these guys to run away to the west as quickly as possible to try to get into a little bit better position somewhere here west of Bastogne, where they can perhaps still maybe slow down the Germans a bit. So we're not going to place either of the objective markers, and we're going to go just right into the movement of the units here. So we'll start off here with I Company down here in the southeast. They're going to flip over to their move side. They're going to come back here for 2, 3, 4, 4.5, 5.5, 6.5, 7.5, and then 8. Right here. That will put them behind the Wilts River here in some okay terrain. And for Love Company, we're going to also keep moving to the west on our move side. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And maybe we'll stay right there behind that stream. Now we need to bring the headquarters down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So if we can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to there, that will put I Company down here back into command radius. And what will we do with 2nd Battalion? I think we will go ahead and 1, 2, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that is also in command radius there. And it is still blocking the N12. So the Germans will have to make an attack to clear him off at least. And I think rather than leaving the trains where they are, I could flip them over to their normal side, but I think instead we're going to shift the MSR to the south here through Wilts. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. And I'm going to set it at the maximum distance for optimal distance here, because we don't anticipate the 1/10th staying in this particular position for very long. I think we're going to continue withdrawing slowly to the west. And I believe that should do it for the 1/10th. There's no fatigue check because no objective marker was placed, no barrages or combats occurred. So now we're looking at a 4 or better to get a second activation for the 1/10th here, which will allow them to get the 2 companies back onto their deployed side and again sort of consolidate their position here. So let's see, got a 50-50 shot, and unfortunately they rolled a 1, so they won't be able to get that second activation. That's going to complete the 1/10th activities on the 17th here, but you can see they are still in the fight, at least for the moment. We'll see what happens when 26th Volksgrenadier and Panzer Lehr activate later on. But now it is back over to the Germans. The Germans are going to bring the action back around to the northern flank again. They're going to follow up Peiper's advance here to the west by activating the rest of 1st SS Panzer Division. Before we begin with the 1st SS Panzer activation, I do want to roll for the Tiger loss. They have to roll every time the Tiger moves. I rolled for the first activation, the first move, but I did not roll for the second, so I will do that now. Anything but a 1 and they're fine, and it is a 6, so no losses to the to Peiper's Tigers here. Now we can get on with 1st SS by flipping over the headquarters to activate it. The trains are on map. They are 15 hexes back up the road here on the east edge of the map board. We are not going to place them into a prepared defense. So for 1st SS, you can see here they are fresh. That's going to give them a +1 for the snafu. They're not coordinated. There's no fatigue. They're not mixed. Game specific is another +1 to make it a +2. The trains are at optimal distance for a +3. They're not ghosted. We're not crossing any streams, and we're not using any tracks. So a +3 to the snafu roll for 1st SS. They roll an 11, becomes a 14. That is a full activation. The headquarters, or rather the formation, has 3 organic artillery points, and they have 3 artillery points assigned to them, which is going to give them a total of 6 artillery points for the activation. We'll go ahead and mark that, and they will also receive 2 objective markers. And now we need to decide where we want to place those. I think the idea, what we want to do with 1st SS, Peiper came roaring through here and off to the west there and reached as far as Malmedy. But there's a gap right now between 12th Volksgrenadier and Peiper. You can see the Tigers are kind of the trailing unit in that formation. There's a bit of a gap here, particularly in the area of the Elsenborn Ridge here. We would like to get this road clear of Americans and any zones of control so that we can start using that as an MSR for the units that are pushing westward. So with that in mind, I think for this activation, what we're going to do is we're going to bring 1st SS along the same path. They're going to take a detour around 12th Volksgrenadier and then come up and sort of fill in the gap here. And if they are fortunate enough to get a second activation, maybe even press forward onto Elsenborn Ridge. So with that in mind, we're going to go ahead and place both of our objective markers on Büllingen, where the engineer detachment is, and see if we can't clear that hex. Now the question is, how do we want to go about doing this? Let's see. I think what we're going to do is, we're going to start off with the Panzer Grenadiers here. We're going to move 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And then we're going to bring up the 2nd Battalion as well. And we will have the 1st Battalion make an attack on Büllingen, assisted by the 2nd Battalion. We're going to spend 1 artillery point in a suppression barrage. So let's see if we can get a little better look at this. All right, the attackers have an action rating of 3. Again, it's a little hard to see with the black on black counters. They are not dual and they have no red support. However, it is in a double objective zone, so that's going to be +1. They're going to get, that's going to bring it up to 4. They're going to get 5, 6 for the suppression and 7 for the assist. On the defender's side, they have an action rating of 2. Because they're an independent unit, they're not dual and they are not in a prepared defense. However, they do occupy some terrain, so that will give them a +1 for a 3. So 7 minus 3 is a +4 on the combat table. 4 added to 9 gives us a 13. That is a D2 and a mandatory retreat. The Engineer Battalion has 3 steps, but because of the forced retreat, that will eliminate it, and it will allow the 1st Battalion to enter Büllingen. I'm going to go ahead and mark off the step losses for the Engineer Battalion, and we will continue on with the rest of 1st SS Panzer's activation. Picking back up with the rest of the activation now, you can see 2nd Infantry Division headquarters is right here on Elsenborn Ridge, and there's now nothing between the lead elements of 1st SS and the headquarters here. It would be nice if the division, if 1st SS can get up into here, it will potentially cut off 99th Infantry Division, which could cause them some issues with their supply. I don't think we've got any more attacks or engagements, any sort of offensive type of action with the 1st SS. So what I think I'll do is save you the trouble of watching me move these guys up through this same path, and we'll get the division deployed fully here, and I'll show you what that looks like once we're done with the movement, and we can see whether or not they'll be able to get a second activation. This is what the 1st SS position looks like at the end of their first activation. The headquarters has moved forward here up to Hunsfeld. You can see the Aufklärungskampfgruppe has pushed onto Elsenborn Ridge and actually crossed the stream here and is threatening to cut the MSR of 99th and 2nd Infantry Divisions. The truck-borne infantry is a little bit slower than the TAC here, and they are trailing back to the south of Büllingen. If we can get a second activation, they'll be able to deploy and move into a better position here. I've moved the trains forward. The headquarters is now tracing down this track, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 hexes, and then the trains then will go along the secondary road here off to the east. I did not want to send the, I did not want to put the trains over here and trace along this track, because then we'd end up crossing the streams of the 12th Volksgrenadier. So this road is assigned to 12th Volksgrenadier, and the 1st SS, as well as Peiper out to the west, are stuck with some poor tracks here to get back to their trains and then off to the east that way. That's going to do it for the first activation. We'll clean these up, and they did make one attack here at Büllingen, so a 3 or less, and they will lose their fresh status. And they actually rolled a 4, so they maintain their fresh status. That's going to be important, as that's going to give them a +1 for a second activation attempt. So the 4 or better, and we're going to get a +1 to this die roll. It is a 5, which becomes a 6. So a second activation for 1st SS. Let's look at the snafu. Again, we have the trains on map, complete MSR. We are not going into prepared defense. We're going to get +1 for being fresh still. No coordination, no fatigue. They're not mixed. We get a +1 for the game specific to bring it up to +2. We are at optimal distance, +3. However, the trains are ghosted, which is going to bring it down to a +2. And we're using tracks with good trafficability, which is another -1. So it's only a +1 on this snafu roll. And it's a good thing it was a +1, otherwise it would have been an outright fail. That's only going to be a partial, but that might be good enough. Let's see. I'm going to take a look at this, and we'll pick back up here in just a second. The partial result is a little annoying. It's gonna hinder 1st SS a bit here, but I think they can still accomplish a few things. We're going to place the only objective marker they get right here on the Camp Delsenborn hex. You can see it is a German victory point hex, which means no German units can enter the hex unless unless it's in an objective zone. That's also going to cover the objective zone will cover the 23rd Regiment of 2nd Infantry Division located here. Now, everybody is reduced to half movement, unfortunately. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So before we do anything else, the first thing we're going to do is take the Jagdpanzer Battalion, and we're going to flip this over. We're going to put it into support. What this is going to do, it's going to give all of the infantry battalions in the division some excellent Red 5 AV support. Now I think we'll start with Knittel. He's going to go 1, 2, 3 and jump the headquarters of the 2nd Infantry Division, which is an unfortunate development for the Americans up north here. The question is, where are we going to put the infantry division? The trains are off to the west here, just a couple of hexes. Let's see if I can slide over. There they are. You can see them over here. So in order to maintain an MSR, the 2nd Infantry is going to have to retreat to the west here, but that's going to place them further away from their units, which may inflict some isolation losses if they end up beyond the 10 hex command radius. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So basically just west of Camp Delsenborn will keep them in the command radius. But that's also 1, 2, 3, 4. That would be less than optimal distance. The trains are going to flip to Ghost regardless because the HQ was jumped. It's also going to eliminate any prepared defense, which the 2nd Infantry Division does not have. So the other option, other than retreating to the west here, would be to retreat, quote, into the pocket, which would require 2nd Infantry Division to redeploy into a legal hex stacked with one of its units. And if we do that, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. And I think we will, it's got to go at least 3 hexes, 1, 2, 3. I think for the moment we may have it retire here. 1, 2, 3. This will, sorry, a little off the edge of the screen there. I'm going to have them withdraw to the north here, and the reason for that is they can still trace through the village of Kalter Herberg, which is located right here. They can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, at least for now, back out to the trains. And I will have to mark them coordination. Place that there. And that was 1, 2, 3 for Knittel. They're going to come back 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 to enter Camp Delsenborn. Now, the 2nd Infantry Division does have support. It's got quite a bit of support. So there is an AV Zoc here. Even if he were not out of movement points, he would have to stop. There's no requirement to do a stopping engagement because it is only support that is exerting the AV ZOC. And the support are all 3 strength. If he did do an engagement, he would have 1 AV plus 5. Action rating would be a total of 6. There's no double objective zone. And he would be shooting at a 4 plus 3 is 7, plus multiple supports would make it an 8. So he'd be at a -2 disadvantage on the engagement table, and there's really no point in him making the engagement. So we're content to have Knittel stop there at Camp Delsenborn. Now, for the rest of the infantry further south to move up, we're going to deploy some of these battalions. The half movement is, like I said, a little inconvenient, so that's going to go 1, 2 to Büttgenbach, and I think we're going to have the headquarters move westward to Motorscheid here along the tracks. That should, let's see, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. He's still in optimal range, so we're going to go ahead and flip the trains over. We're not going to be moving the trains. And now we'll see, what are we going to do here? That's one. We'll have the Pioneers deploy to get, unlike the, if you'll notice, unlike the other Panzer Grenadier battalions, the Pioneers are unprepared on their move side, which means they can't take advantage of the any support. So we're going to flip them over to their deployed side. That will give them 2 movement points, 1, 2, and they will move in and occupy Büllingen. Now we'll have the 2nd Battalion here deploy as well, and he's going to move westward on the tracks to stay with the headquarters unit. And let's see how much further we can get these. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. All right. I'll deploy 2nd Battalion of the 1st as well. Don't see how far we can get him. It's going to be 1. Do we want to go that? Do we want to go 1.5? I guess we'll leave him here. What I'm going to do is the stream right here is going to be the boundary basically between the 12th Volksgrenadier sector and 1st SS. So I'm going to keep as tempting as it would be to kind of jump across here and attack the 99th Infantry Battalion there, I don't want to get mixed up with the 12th Volksgrenadier. So we're going to stay west of the stream here, and this sector will run out to connect up with Peiper's Grenadiers over here. I'd like to get some units north of the stream here in the Elsenborn Ridge area. So in order to do that, we're going to have to leave these guys on their move side, which means they'll be a little less effective when it comes to combat, because instead of a 4 action rating, they're only a 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So why don't we do that to there? And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.5. I guess they're only going to be able to reach out to the west here. I think that's going to do it for the 1st SS. Debating whether or not to make an attack here on the 1st Battalion of the 23rd, and the division will have 3 artillery points. They have 3 organic plus 3 assigned is 6, but it's halved because of the partial to 3. I'm wondering if it's worth the effort here. Yeah, you know, why not? Let's give it a shot. Knittel, well, do I want him? Actually, I don't want him to advance out of the hex. So nope, I think we're not going to make an attack there. However, we will fire 1 artillery point at the Americans, since they are in the open and they are not in prepared defense. It would be a 3 or higher to inflict a step loss. And it is a 2, so no step loss there. The artillery barrage doesn't really hurt us as far as fatigue goes, because it's a 2nd activation, which means it's going to be a 1 or a 2 anyways, and taking that shot only would only be a 1. So I think that's going to be it for the 2nd activation. Again, we'll clean this up and then we'll roll to see if they lose their fresh status for that. And the roll is a 3, so they do retain fresh through the end of the 17th. They are one of the few fresh units still left in the campaign at this point. But I think the Americans were a little surprised at how quickly 1st SS moved. We do have a developing situation in the 99th and 2nd Infantry Division sector, obviously, but more specifically with the supply. Now, the trains are over here to the west, as you can see, and we retreated the 2nd Infantry Division headquarters initially to the north here to maintain an MSR through Kalter-Herberg out to the west. The problem is, as it comes down here, it's going to be cut right here by the zone of control of Knittel. And I think the other option then is going to have them come along this track back to where 9th Infantry Division is entering. So right now the trains are not in a legal hex. They can get to a legal hex, but it's going to have to be at the entry hex, and we're going to be using tracks. So it's not an ideal situation for 2nd Infantry Division as well as the 99th. The 99th, however, is in a worse predicament because their MSR is going to be cut right here by the zone of control from 2nd Battalion of the 1st SS. So they're not even going to be able to get back here to have the option to come up to the north. So we're going to have to take a look at that from the American point of view and see what, if anything, we want to try to do about that. And for now, we are going to send it right back over to the Americans and to see what they decide to do about it. That was a very unfortunate development for the Americans here on Elsenborn Ridge, with the 2nd Infantry Division's headquarters getting overrun and having 1st SS kind of jump into the rear area here of the 99th and 2nd. They still have 8 formations to activate versus the 12 formations that the Germans have. And rather than sort of react immediately to the situation here with a formation that's going to be suffering some bad snafu results, I think instead we want to maximize our opportunity here to actually accomplish something in between these German activations. So we're going to actually jump all the way back down to the other end of the line here, and we're going to get 4th Infantry Division activated. We're going to try to get them activated. Hopefully they can get a decent snafu roll and allow them to sort of strike back at the Germans here before the Germans have an opportunity to kind of mess up their situation like we just saw with 2nd Infantry Division up there. So the Americans will be activating 4th Infantry Division. We're going to flip the headquarters and thereby activate 4th Infantry Division. The trains are on map here at the entry hex, and we have a complete MSR. 4th Infantry Division, as you can see, is in a prepared defense, and while we are going to be taking the offensive this activation, or at least planning on doing so, I think we're going to maintain the prepared defense despite the penalties any attacks we make will have, because looking at the snafu modifiers, there's such a small chance of getting an actual full activation that a partial is really about all we can expect. I think we're looking at probably about a -3. We'll see what it looks like when we add it up, but we'll stay in the prepared defense. That way we don't have to worry about the Germans subsequently attacking and pushing us in. The 4th Infantry Division has some issues on the left flank as well as the right flank, and I think we'll be able to address that in this activation. This turn, they received Task Force Luckett as a reinforcement. It's a dual unit, as you can see, with an action rating of 4 and an AV value of 3 on the deployed side. It's also a fairly big unit at 6 steps, and they also received 2nd Battalion of the 22nd Regiment as an additional reinforcement. So we're going to try to put those 2 reinforcements to good use this activation. So we'll maintain our prepared defense. We'll look at the snafu now. They are fatigue level 2, which is going to hurt. So we're not fresh. There's no coordination. -2 for fatigue. We're not mixed. -2 for the game specific brings it down to -4. Trains are at optimal distance to make it a -3. They are not ghosted, no crossing of the streams, and no track usage. So it's a -3. If we had rolled a 10 or better, similar to what the 110th Regiment did earlier, we would get that full activation. But I think we're just going to stay with the prepared defense, keep that in place. So all we really need is a 6 to get what we need. And unfortunately, not only do we not get a 6, we got a 2. -3 is a failure. So now the decision is, do we convert it to a failure flip and at least reduce our fatigue level by 1 for next turn, or do we attempt to get a 2nd activation? And by doing so, we stand a risk of increasing that fatigue level even more up to a fatigue level of 3. it's not a given either. It's a 4, 5, or 6 to get that second activation. But I think, I think we are going to try and go for it. We're going to try and get this second activation. Need a 4, 5, or 6 here. And we did get a 6. So now we'll see whether or not we can do anything with it. There's no changes. It's still a -3, needing a 6 or better on the dice. And a 9, -3 is a 6. That's going to be a partial, which is what we were looking for initially. So we have one objective marker to place, and we're going to actually make an attack out here to the west. And we have 2 organic artillery points. We have another 4 points attached. So that's a total of 6, halved for the partial. Gives us a total of 3 for the turn. And let's see, there's not a lot we're going to do necessarily. So we'll start by moving him back for a half, and then up here for 1.5. Then we're going to bring the 2nd Battalion of the 22nd over 1, 2. That'll shore up the right flank to the east here a little bit. We're going to slide the engineers up to Lauterborn to solidify the center of the divisional sector. And then with Task Force Luckett, we're unfortunately going to have to flip him over to his move side because he does not have the movement with only half movement. And we're going to send him out to the west here. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Now, the 276th battalions right here do have some red support now that the bridge went up this morning here. So there is an AV ZOC that Luckett will have to stop in or do a stopping engagement. And we will go ahead and do a stopping engagement because we'd like to try and drop the support here of this battalion. So we have a 2 AV plus 4 AR is a total of 6. The Germans have a 2 AR plus 3 for their support is a 5. So it's a +1 on the engagement table with the target is support line. And wow, that was a nice roll. That 11 becomes a 12. That is a target loss and drop. So we are going to inflict a temporary drop of his support. And I'm going to pause here to go ahead and mark the support loss on him as well. That attack actually was even better than I initially thought because the 276th Volksgrenadiers support consisted of a 1-step Hetzer unit, which has now been destroyed. So the entire 276th now is without any support and will not have any support until that unit gets rebuilt or something gets assigned to them. That leaves 1 fire event for Luckett. We don't want to let that go unused. So he will go ahead and attack by fire with the 2nd fire event. They are in terrain, which means a 5 or 6 will inflict 1 step loss. And a 3 misses. This brings us up to the actual attack now. Luckett has a 4 action rating. They are a dual unit, which brings it to 5. We are going to spend 1 of our artillery points in a suppression barrage, 6, 7, and it's assisted for an 8. The defender is action rating 2. They have no support anymore. They are not in a prepared defense. They are, however, in terrain, but there is no hex side terrain. So that's going to add 1 to their 2, so a 3. So we have a dual 5, 6, 7, assist 8 minus 3 gives us a +5 on the combat table. And another solid roll, 8, that becomes 13. That's going to be a D2 and an automatic retreat. Now, since the 2nd Battalion is only 2 hexes from the headquarters, it's going to come off map after it suffers those 2 step losses, and it will reappear at or adjacent to the headquarters next time the unit activates. And with that, Luckett will occupy the hex here. So a successful attack by Luckett. And we've now, actually, we have a zone of control or a unit in a solid line here, all the way from the map edge up around across here into CCA of the 9th Armored. We've got this gap covered with zones of control, and zone of control extends to here. There is a little gap here, and then we have a little 2-hex gap further out to the west near Dekirk. But essentially, from what you can see here in CCA and 4th Infantry Division's sectors, the 2 sectors combined, they've pretty much got a front that's starting to solidify now, and they're starting to hit back at the German attackers. There's really nothing else we're going to do with 4th Infantry. This activation, that was the 2nd activation. They did make an attack, so a 3 or less, and they will increase their fatigue level yet again. And they rolled a 2, which is going to bring them up to a fatigue level of 3. And we'll see how that affects them on the 18th. But overall, 4th Infantry Division was able to accomplish what they wanted to do this particular turn, and they feel like they are in they're in a little better situation now defensively for when the Germans get around to activating the divisions down here. Let's kick it back to the Germans and see what they want to do next. The Germans still have almost all of their formations here in the south, and certainly all of the 7th Army sector formations yet to activate. They've been focusing primarily so far in the turn on pocketing and developing the pocket here around Saint-Vite. And I think we are going to stay there in the north with the Germans and try to lock down this area before the Americans have a chance to react. They still do have a couple of formations in here that have a possibility to activate. They probably will be hard-pressed to even get a partial, but if the Germans can ensure that they can't slip out or do any damage, that's so much the better. So I think what the Germans are going to do is, again, stay here in the north, and I think we're going to go ahead and activate the 3rd Fallschirmjäger. We'll begin by flipping the headquarters for 3rd Fallschirmjäger and activating it. Now, as you can see, they do have a fatigue level of 2. And there's a thought crossing my mind of perhaps maybe we just do a recovery activation with them, which would decrease the fatigue level by 1, putting them in a better position to get a full activation next turn. However, we do still have that +1 snafu modifier. So I think what we're going to do is just press on as much as we can while we have that positive snafu modifier, and really once we get into a position closer to Saint-Vite, we can then we can rest. But for now, these guys need to still try to push as far westward as they can. Now the trains are on map. They are well off to the east there. And they do have a complete MSR. We are not going to put them into a prepared defense, which brings us to the snafu roll. And as I mentioned, they're not fresh. They're not coordinated. They do have -2 for their fatigue level. They're not mixed. They get a +1 for the game specific, so that's going to be a -1. The trains are at optimal distance. So that's going to be back to even, but they are using tracks as you can see here. So that's going to bring it down to a -1. They are no longer crossing the streams, however. So a -1 and 8 or better will get them that full activation that we're looking for here. And they get exactly what they need. So the 8 -1 to a 7 is a full activation. Now the question is, are they going to place either of their 2 objective markers? It depends on, let's see, depends on what we want these guys to do. If we think they're going to be able to get into contact, there's not a lot of Americans. The closest Americans are right down this secondary road. But what I'm looking to do is basically, now that 1st SS Panzer and Peiper have moved through here, we're going to bring the 3rd Fallschirmjäger across to the west bank of the Our, and we're going to give them this area in here to operate in, and we're going to keep the 18th Volksgrenadier south of the Our River and let them deal with the Americans that you see here that are fleeing from the Schnee Eifel. So the 3rd Fallschirmjäger is going to deploy more this way rather than that way. The one thing I need to decide is, are we going to have them try to launch an attack here on the engineers at Schönberg, or are we going to leave that for the 18th Volksgrenadier to clean up? And I'm not even sure if we can even reach, if I can get a battalion and a supporting battalion adjacent here. That's 1, 2.5, so we can get to here. 1, 2, 3. He could go 1, 2.5. He's gonna have to stop there. That's 1, 2. That would be 2 plus 2 would be 4. That costs 6 to get to this hex. So we'd have to stack them. And boy, I hate stacking German units because the American artillery is so prevalent. But the 106th has gone already, so it might be worth it to try and seize Schönberg here. So let's go ahead and let's do that. We're going to place both of our objective markers on Schönberg, and the headquarters has 3 organic artillery. They have another 2 assigned, which is going to give them a grand total of 5 artillery points for this activation. And I think, let me check the lost rosters here and see who we want to have actually make the attack here at Schönberg. All right, so both the 2nd of the 5th and 3rd of the 9th are at full strength, so that won't be a factor. 1, 2.5, 3.5, 4. We could actually get him there where we wouldn't stack, but I don't want to push too far to the south here, so we'll just stack him up. He's going to go 1, 2.5, and 2nd of the 5th, 1, 2, 3. And then we'll have 2nd of the 5th Regiment make the attack, assisted by 3rd of the 9th. And we are going to spend 1 point of artillery in a suppression barrage. The 5th Fallschirmjäger, as you can see, has no support, so they have an action rating of 2. No support. Double objective zone makes it a 3, artillery makes it 4, 5, and the assist makes it a 6 for the attackers. On the defenders' side, we have an engineer battalion here with an action rating of 1. They are no longer in prepared defense because they're part of the 106th Infantry Division and the headquarters was jumped. So they will not get the prepared defense. They do, however, have support, so that's going to make it a 2, and they are in terrain here to make it a 3. So 6 minus 3 gives us a +3 on the attack for the Fallschirmjägers. And it's probably the best attack we'll see from those guys. An 11 plus 3 is a 14. That is a D2 mandatory retreat for the engineers. That's going to be very successful, taking Schönberg, and the headquarters for 106th is a little ways to the west here. So they do have a safe path. We will flip them to their move side and place them, actually we're just going to place them with the headquarters, so at least the headquarters, if another German unit attempts to overrun the headquarters, they'll at least have to make some kind of attack to do so. All right, with that done, the rest of the division is going to continue filing up. 1, 2, 3, 4. You can go 1, 2, 3 and a half. 1, 2, 3. And he's coming up here. And he's going to go 1, 2, 3 and a half. 1, 2, 3 and a half. Now the headquarters, we will move the headquarters forward to, I've got an 8 command radius. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All right, so that's, we're going to leave them right here behind the SS trains, and then we're going to shift our combat trains forward as well. Yeah, that's behind there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Shorten them up, and we've got the two reinforcing battalions that arrived this turn at the headquarters. They also will move 1, 2, 3, 4, and they move up. Well, doubt there's going to be any Americans in the vicinity here, so we'll go ahead and take a chance and stack them up. That's going to do it for the first activation for the 3rd Fallschirmjäger. As we clean this up, we'll take the objective markers off, and we will roll for fatigue. 3 or less, and the fatigue will increase. It is, in fact, a 3, which is going to bring them all the way up to a fatigue level of 3. And with that, we now need to decide, do we want to try to push on for a 2nd activation? They're not quite where I need them to be, and I think it's worth getting to fatigue 4 in order to push them onwards. It's a 6 or higher to get a 2nd activation. So let's see what happens here. And the 4 means no 2nd activation. That's going to finish the day for 3rd Fallschirmjäger. A successful attack for them at Schönberg, and they begin to push westward to try to fill in the gap here north of Saint-Vit. And I think with that activation, we will probably cut off this episode right here. We have a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. There are 12 more German formations to activate, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 American activations left to go. I don't know if we'll be able to finish that up in the next episode, although I think there's a good chance we will, because a lot of the remaining American formations have such hideous snafu modifiers due to being cut off and surrounded, coordinated, etc., that I expect there to be a number of, or at least a few failures, outright failures on the American side. So I'll give you a brief overview here of where we're leaving off, and then we'll pick up next episode with the next American activation. What we've seen today in today's episode, Kampfgruppe Peiper got moving early on, came through here, detoured to the south around 12th Volksgrenadier here, and struck rapidly westward, reaching Malmedy, which they were able to take at the end of their 2nd activation. Right behind them came the rest of 1st SS Panzer Division, except they turned north rather than continuing on west in order to fill the gap here between 12th Volksgrenadier and Peiper. And you can see some lead elements of the 1st SS have actually overrun the Elsenborn Ridge area and gotten into the rear of 2nd and 99th Infantry Divisions, causing some concern for the Americans here. However, they do have some good reinforcements that are arriving this turn, and will activate here probably in our next episode. The question will be, can they get into action before it's too late in the north? Now, since the Germans have focused much of their efforts so far this turn on forming and solidifying the pocket here around Saint-Vit, which, as you can see, is they've pretty much closed it here with the 1/16th from the south and Peiper from the north. There are still a lot of American units that need to be cleaned up in this pocket. That's an operation that is still going to take probably several days for the Germans, even if things go well. So it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out. And just to the west, we have the very powerful 7th Armored Division. They have clashed with 116th Panzer. Both sides have taken heavy tank losses, and it'll be a matter of seeing which one can replenish their tank losses and grab the initiative out here in the west. Now, since the Germans have spent most of the turn so far focused in the north, they really haven't done much in the central sector or anything in the south. The Americans, on the other hand, were able to get 110th Infantry Division to fall back, start to get a little reorganized. Now, they are still a long way from being out of danger, because they are going to be hotly pursued by the 26th Volksgrenadier Division here, which has yet to activate. And we should see that in our next episode. However, if the 110th can catch a few breaks over the next couple of days, they may be able to consolidate into a decent defensive position, especially if they can get some reinforcements and some help out here to the west. Further south, in the 7th Army sector, the Americans have had CCA of the 9th Armored and 4th Infantry Division make some local counterattacks to try to reestablish the defensive position here. And for the most part, they were successful with that. The line is nearly complete. It's very thin, and they are certainly still outnumbered. But the situation down here in the southern sector for the Americans is nowhere near as critical as it is in most of the other sectors. Now, one of the big questions remaining for the turn is Panzer Lehr, yet to activate. That's the Germans' 4th Panzer Division that is currently on map. Where do the Germans send Panzer Lehr? Are they going to send them out to the south here? Are they going to try and move them up behind 2nd Armored? Are they going to send Panzer Lehr to help out 116th up here and engage 7th Armored Division? Who knows? We're going to have to wait and see there. But as of now, the Germans have 2nd Panzer Division, 116th Panzer Division, and the 1st SS Panzer Division, all across the Our, heading west with very, very little in front of them, except in the 116th Panzer's sector. I almost forgot, there is one other Panzer Division that we have not mentioned yet, and that is the 12th SS Panzer Division here, the other half of 1st SS Panzer Corps. This is, again, one of the, if not the most powerful German formation in the game, and they are approaching the 99th lines to the east here, so we'll have to see what happens when these two finally clash. So we've got a lot more action coming up for you. Stay tuned. We appreciate you watching today. Take care.